My talk is going to be about the trend of improving as an engineer based on my history. So who am I? I'm an engineering manager at the BBC. I've been with them for almost 2 years now. I've got 25 years experience in the industry, the first 12 as a software engineer, going through the journey of junior through to principal. But for the last 13 years, I've been in software management or engineering management. The last 10 years, approximately, I've worked at the BBC now, but I spent almost 2 years at Facebook, a year and a half at Channel 9 back in Australia, and 4.5 years at Amazon. All four of those roles in the video on demand client technology. So what I want to do is I want to start with a little bit of housekeeping. One of the things I noticed at the two companies that I'm using to guide my thoughts here is that titles or role titles are important to understand. So if you're joining a company, one of the first things you should do is understand what it is and what you need to do to progress through your levels as an engineer. So in this slide, you can see sort of the 6 big tech companies, and I worked at 2 of them. I worked at Amazon and Facebook. And what I really liked about this site, it's levels.fyi, is having worked at Facebook and Amazon, I agree with the expectations as displayed here. SDE1, which is a junior at Amazon in the middle column, SDE2 is a mid, SDE3 is a senior, and then you have your principal as a level 4 engineer. Looking at someone like in E4, which would be a mid as a title, at Facebook, you see it's sort of a little bit in the SDE1 space and finishes a little bit before an SDE2. So their expectations are different. The other interesting one to look at is the principal SDE in Microsoft versus the principal SDE in Amazon. You can see the principal SDE in Microsoft clearly falls inside what Amazon would consider a senior engineer as an SDE3. So titles are important when you join the company to understand exactly where expectations lie. So the other thing is there's a trend that I've identified in my time with Amazon and going forward, that there are minimum amounts of time that you would be expected to be in a level. It's controversial because there are always exceptions, but those exceptions are few, they're not the rule. So it would be expected that as a grad joining the big tech companies, you'll spend 12 months as a junior, sort of learning on the job and improving yourself and getting the experience you need before you'll be effective as a mid engineer or a level 2 engineer. The next expectation is on average, the trend would be that it takes about 24 to 36 months to level up to a senior role or level 3. Interestingly, at big tech, usually senior roles are career position. There is no expectation that you ever go to principal. I've worked with engineers who were a senior engineer for the previous 15 years, were in the early 50s at the company and had no plan whatsoever to go any further because they were happy at what they were doing. And then level 4 is usually the principals in big tech is about 1 to 10% of the company. So 1 in 100 engineers would be a principal. They were quite rare in my time at both of the big techs. So another piece of housekeeping, as you grow through your career, your sphere of influence is expected to expand. So as a level 1 junior, your influence on the people in the business is yourself. You know, you make yourself better, you learn the code, you learn the product, you learn the tools, you learn all these basic stuff. So a lot of your energy is about self-education. So your sphere of influence as a junior is sort of yourself. As you go to a mid, that sphere of influence expands to include your team. As a mid engineer, you'll help juniors on board. You'll help other mids break down their problem spaces and then create solutions with them. So your influence, what you actually do, the value that you bring to the business expands to include the team. When you hit senior, you'll start realizing that you're expected to have impact on the organization. In my current role at the BBC, I'm part of iPlayer, and the organization in this case would be iPlayer. Now, senior engineers are not just helping the team deliver, they're attending meetings with other senior engineers from across other teams to help them define a solution, or do code reviews, or they're doing more work outside of the team. So their influence, the expectation is that it's grown. And then when you hit principal, your actual influence will start to expand to include the business. So again, in my current example at the BBC, our organization, next level up would be the the D&E team. So we would expect principals to not just build things for or have influence on iPlayer. They might actually influence a recommendations engine that's used across the BBC. An example I like to use because that's actually a true fact. We do have principal engineers that have that sort of impact, and that would be an expectation of a successful principal in the terms of their sphere of influence. So the next thing that tends to happen is the scope and complexity of what you work on as you improve and level up as an engineer tends to change. So as a junior engineer, you might work on simple, well-defined tasks. So you might get a Jira ticket, which has got a well-defined problem that you need to go and solve. As you level up to mid, you might actually be assigned epics or larger ambiguous problems that aren't well-defined. And it's your job to maybe well-define them, create other tickets and farm them out to the juniors in your team. So you've sort of grown in the scope and complexity of what you own as an engineer. As you get to the next level, level 3 senior, your scope and complexity of what you build and what your tickets look like might define a very ambiguous, we need a whole system designed. So now you're building not just single epics, you may be designing or defining multiple epics that you then have to farm out to mids, who will then break that down into small solvable pieces that might farm it out to the juniors in the team. So there's this whole value chain happening as you sort of grow in your levels and responsibilities. And then of course, when you get to principals, we're talking whole of business impact and a multi-system impact. Again, the example of a recommendations engines at the BBC, we're not building one for iPlayer, we're building one for all of the different digital products across the board. And we wouldn't expect a senior engineer to do that. We would expect principal engineers with all their experience and knowledge to come to the front and build that for us and design that for us. So your scope and complexity goes up. So these are just basic fundamental things. As you sort of grow through your levels, your sphere of influence expands, then the scope and complexity of what you own and deliver gets broader and broader. These become sort of themes through the rest of this conversation. So to the meat of this thing, in my observation, I broke it down to 4 pillars of value that engineers bring and deliver for the businesses they work for. You've got technical, people, product, and business. Now, as you grow and mature and level up through your career, the amount of time and effort you put into each one of these 4s will shift. As it shifts, that is sort of the indication that you're ready to level up. So in technical, it's your raw technical output as an engineer. This is the bread and butter of what you do as an engineer. You write code that delivers the needs of the business. You debug that code that you just wrote. You do system designs as you grow into the more senior levels. You write specs, you write wikis, you define and build your CI/CD pipelines. You define and architect infrastructure and then support it operationally. You do code reviews and all these sort of things. These are the pretty standard stuff that every engineer and at every level sort of understands as their day-to-day job. But what I've observed is the trend that over time that all changes. What the amount of effort and energy you focus in your day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month into technical value for your business changes. So as level 1 junior, my expectation is you'll spend 80% of your effort looking and writing code, right? This is simply because you're straight out of the university, you've just graduated, you have all this really cool knowledge in your head, or you've just come from a training course and you've got all the stuff that you've got, and this is where you're going to focus your energy in delivering value. Again, your sphere of influence is yourself, and the technical bar is well-defined problems to solve. So as a junior engineer, you're writing code. Now, as a mid, you're still writing code, but now it's only taking 70% of your effort. But what's interesting here, what I've observed is as a level 1 junior, you may have attempted to deliver 10 pull requests or 10 changes in a month. And of those 10, 4 made it to production. And that took 80% of your time and effort. It's because you didn't know the code, perhaps you didn't know the libraries to use. The mids and your seniors in your team have supported you, and you've had to iterate on your code requests quite a few times before it got to the point where it's shipped. So that 80% of your effort doing that is exactly the right thing to be doing. But when you get to mid, the expectations change. So now over a month, you might be shipping 40 code requests, shipping to public, but it's only taking 70% of your effort. The reason being is after your 1 year in the role as a junior, you found all the bugs in the code. You know which libraries to now use. You know which function that was written by an engineer 3 years ago to go and use to do the hard thing instead of recreating that hard thing yourself. So you've gone through that year as a junior and that 80% of effort learning. So now you're more effective and more efficient at delivering the technical raw output and the technical value as a mid. So you're delivering more with less energy. It continues into a senior. A senior engineer, and if you talk to many of them, even at the BBC, you'll find that they're really only spending half their time writing code, or doing code reviews or writing up wikis or doing a spec. The other half of the time is doing other things, and that's the other 3 values. But interestingly, that 50% of their effort that they're focusing on it, instead of delivering 40, they might be delivering 60 pull requests and actual changes to the public. So they're effectively delivering more value with less effort than they did as a junior or mid. And this is just the trend that sort of happens that I've observed. So you'll deliver more easily in the technical space. And that's sort of the obvious expectations of leveling up as an engineer. Level 4, I'm not going to talk to you right now. There's a sort of a theme that I'll get to at the end of the deck. Where level 4, when you hit the principal, there's another set of expectations that kick in. So people. So what's the people value that engineers bring? The main question that you need to answer as an engineer is how do you make those around you better? It's like as a junior, with your sphere of influence being yourself, that the question becomes, how do you make yourself better? And like, how do you make yourself more valuable to the business? So it's things about like learning new tools, learning new design patterns and when to apply them, mentoring and coaching in your later career, like when you get to mids and senior, you're going to start mentoring and coaching, going for meetups like this one. This is how you keep yourself educated to make yourself better. So you're increasing your value to the business. How does it play out though, as your career and you level up? It's the other 20% of the effort for a junior. Straight out of university into a new business, learning all that stuff takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort. So if you're focusing your time at like 20% of your effort in making yourself better, learning the tools, learning the product, learning how to do things, and maybe unlearning what you learned at university because it doesn't work in the real world. If you're doing all that, you're doing the right thing as a junior, right? You're spending that time and effort of powering yourself up to get you to the point where you can get to the next level. As a mid, it's only a small bump up to 20, like an extra 5% of your energy. Your sphere of influence now has grown to be not just yourself, because the expectation is you're still going to improve yourself constantly for your entire career. You don't get to not improve yourself or you will fall behind. The other 5% is now that you're a mid, you'll get things like maybe onboarding a junior or onboarding another mid. These new expectations are going to land on your table as something that you need to do as an engineer. So there's now an increased expectation on the value that you bring to the business based on how you help those around you become better. As you approach senior, it drops down again, is what I've observed. And that's not because you're doing less. What it means is you've actually learned tools to be better at making those around you better. Like being a mentor and a coach is hard. Like being an effective mentor and coach is really hard. So as a mid, you've gone through these learning trials where you've improved the skill set that you have to make yourself a more effective mentor and coach. So by the time you hit level 3, instead of like mentoring all the mids on your team, that you might find an opportunity to expand your sphere of influence and mentor a mid on another team who's close to becoming a senior. So that mentorship, the value of that mentorship of getting someone from mid to senior is more value to the business than mentoring a junior to a mid. So there's your mentorship program as an example, by the way. The amount of effort you put into it is less, but the reward and the value you bring to your business is more. And that's an expectation that I would set on a senior engineer. You might also do things like at senior, you might start presenting at meetups. You might start writing Confluence pages or wiki pages where you're describing a new tool and then doing brown bags at your business where you're describing that to all the other engineers, making them better. So there's this opportunity about how you constantly improve yourself and those around you. And the expectation changes who and how often and how much effort you put into that as you grow through your career. The next area, the third area, is the product. So the question is, how do you add value to the product? There are things like feature definition, doing what product opportunities, or what ideas should the product chase. You might participate in user studies. You might start participating in design, putting together mock-ups, like working with the designers. You might start, you'll start making decisions that are more data-driven as opposed to technology-driven as you go through your career. Your expectation and how you apply the value that you bring to your product will change. You might start, like as a mid or a senior, you might start participating in ideation processes within your business, or representing the product, not the technology, to other teams. As you start going through these things that start to kick in as the value that you bring to your business. So as a junior, you're already busy. You're 80% doing your technology and delivering value through technology. You have 20% delivering value through you growing. As you hit mid, 5% of your time, rounding out 100% of the time and effort that you put into your role, you'll start bringing some of these feature value opportunities into your role. You might start at that stage participating in user studies or attending them and watching them. You might start defining new features for your product. Features not only have you designed that make it to the product, right? You start actually delivering value to the product, not through your technical thinking, but from your product ownership. And as a level 3 or a senior engineer, most senior engineers will realize all of a sudden, one day in a week, they're talking, or they're going to an ideation session or a design review or mock-up review, or representing the product at an all hands, right? This becomes part of their expected role and part of the value that they bring to their business. That's sort of the path through to level 3. And the last section, that as you grow, you'll start bringing value to the business around, to the literal business itself. That's outside of technology and outside of the product. The first bullet point here, hiring practice, doesn't mean you start interviewing. You might be asked to help in defining what good hiring practice is. Like, how many interviews do you do? Phone screens? What do the exams look like in the phone screen? You will start participating in business-wide initiatives around hiring. The more senior you get, and I've done this in the past, I will bring more senior engineers to vision statement conversations, like when we were stating the vision or mission statements. You might start representing your company at internal conferences or external conferences, like the business itself, not your product, but like the business. And you might be brought into conversations as an engineer to talk about team structures. What is the good structure to deliver an API for your critical system? And your expected and the value you will bring will be your input to what a good team structure looks like. And you may even be brought in your later years and your later levels into strategy participation, looking at what's a good 3 to 5 year plan. And again, I've done this in my previous roles. But how does it look like? Well, obviously, you would not take a junior engineer to look at the vision statement for your business. It wouldn't make good business sense. Your mids, the same. They're pretty busy delivering everything else. They're 100% full. But as a senior, it's not unfair, and it would be an expectation, especially in big tech, that you're participating in these sort of problems. you're helping solve the team structures. And team structure is an interesting one because as a senior engineer in a successful product or a successful team, you end up growing and growing and growing, and then you split into two, and they start growing and growing and growing. And that's sort of a healthy way to expand your business, especially in big tech. So this is like team structure and how you split a team. I've had many of those conversations where I've brought in my sort of seniors and my principals into those conversations to help work out what would be healthy for the business to bring the most value. Again, level 4, we will get to. So that's sort of it. So this is an overview of where we got to. And for level 4, what I've found and what I normally expect, it's a very nebulous area of ownership, because by the time you hit principal, you've built up your skill set across all 4 of those values. So what I would normally expect a principal, and what's expected, is that they look for holes in those 4 pillars and they will plug them. So every now, if I join a team and there's not a lot of junior engineers on it and not a lot of senior, I would expect that I would spend most of my time focused on people growth, perhaps maybe 50% of my time, and technology, because they're only junior, they don't know how to do system design. So my role as a level 4, which I consider EMs to be, or software development managers to be, I might plug into those 2 places and spend 100% of my time in those 50% each one of those. But if I've got a team that's really strong, focused, well-formed, it's got a nice junior, mid, senior, principal makeup, I might have to spend 0% of my effort in the technology. So that might free me up to think about the product more or focus my energy on the business more. So at level 4, as a principal engineer and as a team leader or a software development manager, depending on your company, you will find that you'll actually spend most of your time calibrating exactly where you can bring your focus and your effort to deliver the most value for your team and your business. And that is it.